Also, this week I watched the restoration from what now 26 years ago, from 2000, of Amores by Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu. Iñárritu, of course, from what is it? The Revenant, Birdman, or the blah blah blah. Babel, 21 Grams. He's done a ton of really big movies, but Amores Perros really is one of the movies that really put him on the map. And it's a movie I had never seen before. It's one of those movies that's been on my need to watch list forever, because I know it's a really influential movie from the early thousands, late 90s. I wasn't sure the year exactly. I guess it was 2000. I knew it had a lot of huge fans. It had made a big influence at the time. And I finally had a reason to watch it when we had a screener come through for this restoration. The restoration, it's kind of interesting. I think it's coming out for MUBI, but at the beginning of it, it gives you a bunch of information about the restoration process, and it looked like Criterion had done a lot of the work on it. So maybe Criterion had owned it, done a lot of work on it, and then it got repurchased or finished by MUBI. I'm not sure how that worked exactly, but they obviously took one really clean, pristine prints and got it to 4K level. The sound is just restored as good as they can get it. This movie looks very fresh. It doesn't look super dated. The only things that are so kind of dated about it is there's some super shaky handheld stuff, which is early thousands sort of coded, but not too much of it. And there's a little bit of fashion you'll see in there where you're like, I can tell the era this is from, but overall it kind of looks timeless. I think you could watch it and not notice those things and just be like, this was made in the last 5 years. You wouldn't really know. Let me give you a quick list of some of the people in Amores Perros, which means love is a bitch, according to the translation. El Chivo is played by Emilio. Octavio is played by Gael Garcia Bernal, which is probably the most famous name to most Americans. It's been in a ton of things, of course. Susana is played by Vanessa. Valeria is played by Goya Toledo. And Daniel is played by Alvara Guerrero. There's a whole bunch of other people, of course. This is essentially it's a three-story collection put into one film of sorts. They all do interact, and it isn't. At first, I thought it would be one of those things where you have this major event, which in this case is a car crash, and I thought all the stories would lead up to the car crash, so you'd see one whole story, then the car crash, and then you go back to a whole other story and how they ended up the car crash, and so on and so forth. You do get a little of that, but a lot of this is just some crossover, and then the story also keeps moving forward. So, for example, the first story, which is Octavio and Susana, pretty much starts the car crash and then shows the whole set of events that led to that car crash. Whereas the next story, which is Daniel and Valeria, that pretty much takes place almost totally after the car crash. Like the effects of the car crash on Valeria and Antonio. And then the third one, which is The Goat, which is El Chivo, The Goat and Mara, that one takes place throughout the whole time span, from before till after, and then eventually you do meet up. You do just follow his story as the final of the three, mostly after the car crash as well. They also all have some sort of a connection to dogs. Like all of the stories have some big plot point revolving around dogs. The first one involves dog fighting, and the warning is that there is a lot of scenes of dog fighting, which can be really disturbing for people. And I did look and read about it because I was really curious, like what was the treatment of dogs in this movie? Because you definitely will worry immediately when you see this movie, like, oh my gosh, did they just kill a bunch of dogs for this movie? Because it looks like they did, and apparently no actual dog fights occurred. They were all simulated with invisible muzzles, and a lot of the times the dogs were playing and they just cut it in a way that made it look more like they were fighting. And anytime you see dead dogs, which is a lot, so be warned on that the dogs were actually sedated. And even that, around the dogs being sedated, it was like overseen by the SPCA, and no dog was sedated for more than a certain amount of time, and none of them were sedated like repeatedly. So they did their best to make it very realistic, but not harmful to the dogs. So I'll give them credit for making good attempts at that, which is a big concern if you watch this movie. So just a big, giant trigger warning if you're a dog lover. This can be a rough watch. So like I said, the first story, Octavio and Susana, is basically about this guy who uses dog fighting to try to make money because he's trying to escape his life. And that's the Gael Garcia Bernal character. And he is basically in love with his brother's wife, who his brother and his brother's wife live in the same small home with him and with the Octavio character. And Octavio secretly is in love with his brother's wife, who is now pregnant with her second kid. She has a very abusive relationship, and essentially their affair is going to maybe lead to her leaving his brother and coming away with him. If he can just get enough money through this dogfighting, he can escape his life, run away with his brother's wife, and give them both a happy life. That's kind of the basic plot of that first story. And once again, he's going to make this money by dogfighting his brother's dog. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. It's a very gritty story. There's a lot of tension in it. Some really great character work. You really root for certain characters, and it does make some twists and turns that you don't necessarily see coming exactly as they do. Really good story. Then you've got Danielle and Valeria. Once again, Valeria is this huge popular model. She's on billboards and everything. And there's a whole story about how she's affected greatly by her injuries from the car wreck. Because the beginning of the first story, like I said, Octavio and Iver, he's running from some people after a dogfight, and he gets in a big wreck. And one of the cars he wrecks into is the one with this model, Valeria. Her whole life is being beautiful and glamorous and all this stuff. And of course, immediately she's basically down for a long time with huge injuries, especially to her legs. And she has this cute little, like the stereotypical model dog, a little fluffy dog. And it ends up falling into a floorboard hole in their apartment. It gets into the floor, and they can't get to it. And it's down there barking and running around down there, and she's really distraught, but she can't get to it. And the degradation of her relationship with her boyfriend, who has left his wife and family to be with her, the way their relationship degrades, and it's combined with the stress of this dog being lost in the walls or the floor, essentially, and her loss of all of the things that made her famous and desirable because of her injuries. That's the crux of that whole story. Then the final story is, once again, is the goat and Mara, Il Chivo, the goat. He looks like an older, unhappy dude with a ton of dogs, and he just wanders around to all the scenes in the other stories. And eventually you get his whole backstory and who he is and what he is. And it's very surprising. He's not what you think he is. He's not just, of course, what do you think anybody is who's unhoused? You don't know. You don't know their story. Every one of them has a story of some sort. It may just be drug abuse and addiction and mental health issues, but it might be something totally different. And in his case, it is something totally different, and I'll let you discover that yourself. But it's an interesting story that I think was going to play out a certain way and ends up playing out very differently. And a morality play and a play about, like, how do you go on with your life when you've taken a certain path and it's impacted your relationships irreparably with your children. And is there a way to repair that? Is there a way to make peace with that? And how do you do that? And especially if you've had a very subversive, dangerous life, which he's had. So really interesting, cool movie. I can see how it put Iñárritu on the map. It's got elements that seem a little post-Tarantino, but the style is not that at all. It's much more grounded. He's got a great eye and a great vitality to his filmmaking. I'm going to go 4 stars for it because as a compilation of stories, there isn't always, you get so into a certain story, but then it has to end and you go to the next story. Whereas I could have seen maybe 1 or 2 of these becoming full features, and I think it would have been slightly more fulfilling to just have that fully fleshed out story instead of, each of these stories gets maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes, which are great, but I could have gone for even more for some of them. So 4 stars. Once again, really worth checking out. If you haven't checked it out like myself, you might consider doing that.